Segregation been here from time to time, but we just ain't gonna pay no mind. It's moving on. It's moving on.
I am Ben West, and this is my city. For the past 10 years, I have been its mayor. I have watched it grow from an overgrown country town into a great metropolitan complex.
Nashville was proud of its progressive tradition. A center for education, the arts, and industry, it had long promoted itself as the Athens of the South. But Nashville, like most southern cities, was segregated. Attracted by the city's 4 black colleges, many young people arrived from other parts of the country and encountered their first experience with segregation.
I was looking forward in college to really expanding myself and growing. I was taking those kinds of issues very seriously. And that played quite a part when I got to Nashville in why I so keenly resented segregation and not being allowed to do basic kinds of things like eating at restaurants in the 10-cent stores.
Looking for a way to fight segregation, Diane Nash and other students were drawn to activist Jim Lawson and his workshops in nonviolent direct action.
And that is to try to have one major role-playing experience which sort of tries to set the stage for an actual demonstration, for an actual sit-in.
When Jim Lawson came to the city, he began to organize students, right? And most important to that for both students and we who were ministers was that we had workshops. And the workshops in nonviolence made the difference. We began to understand the philosophy behind it, the tactics, the techniques, how to, in fact, begin to take the blows and still respond with some sense of dignity.
Nashville students would be motivated by an event that took place in Greensboro, North Carolina. On February 1st, 1960, 4 black college students sat down at a lunch counter reserved for whites and refused to leave. It was a direct challenge to Southern law and tradition.
Well, it's just not the things we're used to down here. I mean, they come in and they sit down, and we're not used to them sitting down beside us because I wasn't raised with them. I never have lived with them, and I'm not going to start now.
As the sit-ins spread across the country, John Lewis, Angela Butler, and Diane Nash led students to Nashville's first sit-in.
The students were dressed like they were on the way to church. We went into the local stores. These stores were known all across the South, and for the most part, all across the country. We took our seats in a very orderly, peaceful fashion. We stayed there at the lunch counter studying and preparing our homework because we were denied service. The manager ordered that the lunch counters be closed, that the restaurants be closed. We just sit there, and we continue to sit all day long.
The sit-ins continued without incident for almost 2 weeks. Then, on February 7th, a warning. Gangs of toughs were gathering downtown. The students sat in as planned. The police did nothing to protect them. The students remained true to their strategy of nonviolence. When the police vans arrived, more than 80 demonstrators were arrested and charged with disorderly conduct.
The day that the police first arrested us, they announced to us, okay, all you niggers, get up from the lunch counter and, or we're going to arrest you. And And their attitude was like, well, we warned you. So they repeated it a couple of times and nobody moved. And of course we were prepared for this. So they said, well, we warned you, you won't move, okay, everybody's under arrest. And then they turned and they looked around at the lunch counter again, and the second wave of students had all taken seats. And they were confounded. They kind of looked at each other like, now what do we do, you know? And they said, well, okay, we'll arrest those two. And they did it. And then the third wave. And no matter what they did and how many they arrested, there was still a lunch counter full of students there.
Peace, quiet, and good order will be maintained in our city to the best of our ability. Riots, melees, and disturbances of the peace are against the interest of all our people, and therefore cannot be permitted.
The local black community began to unite behind the students. Black merchants supplied food to those in jail. Homeowners put up property for bail money. The court found the students guilty of disorderly conduct. John Lewis refused to pay the $50 fine. He chose 33 days in the city workhouse instead. Most of the other students joined him in jail. To fight the jailing of their children, parents turned to the power of their own pocketbooks. In Nashville, in 1960, black buying power was estimated at $50 million a year, with $10 million spent in the downtown stores alone. Within a month, the boycott by black customers was almost completely effective. April 19th. Dynamite thrown from a passing car at 5:30 in the morning destroyed the home of Z. Alexander Luby, one of Nashville's black city councilmen and defense attorney for the arrested students. The blast was so powerful it shattered 147 windows in Meharry Medical College across the street. Miraculously, no one was killed.
It was such an outrageous act that it could be very useful to a nonviolent movement then to move. Okay, it was a uniting of the city, but the outcome would be decided by how we in fact channel that energy, right? And we then had the first major march of the movement. People began to gather, and we began to march, and students came out from the lunchrooms, and they came out from being on the campus grounds, and they joined, and they came out of buildings and dormitories. We filled Jefferson Avenue. It's a long, long way down Jefferson. After a while, there was a certain bit of singing, and as we came closer to town, it was merely the silence of the feet.
Face to face on the steps of City Hall, Reverend C.T. Vivian condemned the mayor for his failure to speak out in the past. Diane Nash pushed Ben West to take a personal stand.
We needed him to say integrate the counters, or to tell Nashville to do what Nashville knows it should have done a long time ago, like about 95 years ago after the Civil War. So I asked the mayor, first of all, Mayor West, do you feel that it's wrong to discriminate against a person solely on the basis of his or color?
And I tried as best I could to answer it, frankly and honestly, that I could not agree that it was morally right for someone to sell them merchandise and refuse them service. And I had to answer it just exactly that way. Of course, I received considerable criticism for it, but had I to answer it again, I would answer it in the same way again, because it was a moral question and was one that men have to answer and not a politician.
3 weeks after Ben West's statement on the steps of City Hall, black customers were served for the first time at lunch counters in downtown stores. On April 15th, 1960, more than 200 veterans of the sit-in movement from Nashville and from other cities around the country gathered in Raleigh, North Carolina. Some suggested they join the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, led by Dr. Martin Luther King. But SCLC's executive director, Ella Baker, advised the students to remain independent.
Ella Baker was very important, giving direction to the student movement in terms of really seeing how important it was to recognize the fact that the students should set the goals and directions and maintain control.
They formed the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and began organizing black communities throughout the South.